The evening sky spread across the open land, like soft paint brushed over a giant canvas. The sun was lowering behind the distant hills, creating long shadows that stretched across Caleb Hartley's ranch. Caleb had lived on this land his whole life. He knew the sound of every moving thing, the soft steps of cattle, the rustle of wind through dry grass, even the distant echo of riders traveling along the old trail. But that evening, a sound he didn't expect reached his ears. The slow, tired clop of a horse, approaching from the west. Caleb paused in his work. He had been repairing a fence post, but now he leaned on it, squinting into the distance. At first, he saw nothing but dust drifting in the warm light. Then, little by little, a single rider came into view. The man looked as if he had been traveling for days, without rest. His back was curved, his shoulders slumped, and even his horse moved with the weary rhythm of exhaustion. Caleb didn't often receive visitors, certainly not strangers arriving at sundown. His ranch sat far off the main trail, and most folks passed by without stopping. So the sight of a lone rider heading straight toward him felt unusual, almost unsettling, though he tried not to assume the worst. The West was wide enough for travelers of all kinds. Some kind, some lost, some looking for help. Caleb had always believed in being cautious, not fearful. He stepped away from the fence and slowly walked toward the front yard of the ranch house. As the rider came closer, Caleb noticed more details. The man's clothes were dusty and wrinkled, as if he had slept on hard ground for several nights. His hat was tilted low, nearly hiding his eyes, which seemed to fight to stay open, and his hands loosely held the reins, almost slipping from tired fingers. Caleb remained still, letting the rider approach at his own pace. When the horse finally stopped a few steps away, the man struggled to lift his head. Caleb could now see his eyes uncertain, clouded, and filled with something that looked like fear mixed with hope, as if he wasn't sure what kind of welcome he would receive. "Evening," Caleb said gently, keeping his voice calm. The man took a deep breath, almost as if breathing itself required effort. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words came slowly, unsteady. "Please, one shot stop me." Caleb's eyebrows lifted in confusion. The words were jumbled, not making sense in any clear way. The man seemed to realize this. He tried again, but his voice cracked into silence. He looked like someone who had pushed himself far past his limits, someone carrying a burden too heavy to describe in one breath. Then, without warning, the rider's legs gave out. He slipped from the saddle with no strength left to hold himself. Caleb lunged forward, catching him before he hit the ground. The man was thin, weak, and burning with fever. His clothes were warm with heat from his skin, and his breaths came in quick, uneven bursts. Caleb gently eased him to the ground. The man tried to speak again, but his voice was barely more than a whisper. I can't keep running." Caleb's natural instinct to help others took over. Whatever the man meant before, Caleb knew he wasn't in his right state of mind. He needed water, rest, and someone to listen. Caleb had seen tired travelers before, but never someone this worn down. "You're all right," Caleb said softly. "You're safe for now. Let's get you inside." The man shook his head slightly, as if unsure whether he deserved comfort or fear. But Caleb didn't ask questions yet. There would be time for that later. For now, he needed to take care of him. Caleb lifted one of the man's arms over his shoulder and helped him stand, guiding him toward the house. The man stumbled a few times, but Caleb held him steady, speaking calmly to keep him awake. Inside the house, Caleb helped him sit in a wooden chair near the table. The man's eyes wandered around the room, as if expecting danger, even in a peaceful place. Caleb poured cool water from a clay jug into a cup and handed it to him. The man reached for it, but his hands shook too much. Caleb steadied the cup and helped him drink. After several small sips, the man leaned back, breathing a little easier. Caleb studied him quietly. His face was sunburned and tired, with lines that didn't come from age but from worry and sleepless nights. He looked like someone who had been carrying a heavy secret, one that had drained all his strength. "I'm Caleb Hartley," he said in a calm voice. "You're on my ranch. Don't worry, you're not in any trouble here. What's your name?" The man hesitated, as if the answer itself might bring danger. "Elias. Elias Crane." Caleb nodded. "All right, Elias. You're safe. Nobody out here means you harm." Elias's eyes darted toward the door, then back at Caleb. He seemed to want to believe him, but his fear sat deep, gripping him like a shadow that wouldn't leave. Caleb pulled up another chair, sitting across from him. "I won't ask you questions you're not ready to answer, but I can tell you this, you're exhausted. You need rest. And whatever you meant earlier, we'll sort it out. You don't need to face anything alone right now." Elias looked away, as if those words touched a place he had buried. His hands tightened around the edge of the table, his breathing unsteady. Caleb realized that Elias wasn't just tired. He felt trapped by something unseen, something he had tried to escape for longer than his strength allowed. The room grew quiet, except for the distant sound of wind brushing across the land. Caleb waited patiently, giving Elias space to gather his thoughts. He knew that trust wasn't something given instantly, especially by someone who seemed this frightened. After a long moment, Elias finally spoke again, his voice trembling. "I didn't want to bring my trouble to you. I didn't mean to. I just ran until I couldn't anymore." Caleb nodded slowly. "Trouble finds everyone, eventually. But folks deserve a chance to rest, no matter what they're running from." Elias stared at him, as if searching for any sign of judgment, but Caleb's face remained calm and steady. The rancher had always believed that kindness wasn't weakness, it was strength. And in a world where so many acted with suspicion, he chose patience instead. "I saw your ranch," Elias whispered. "It looked safe, peaceful. I thought maybe I could ask for help. Just once." "You did the right thing," Caleb said. "Anyone would need help in your state." Elias lowered his gaze to his trembling hands. "I didn't know if anyone would listen or care. I've been alone for so long." "Trenjan." Caleb stood and placed a warm blanket around Elias's shoulders. "Well, you're not alone right now, and you're welcome to stay here until you get your strength back." Elias closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth sink into him. It was the first time, in days, maybe weeks, that he felt a small sense of safety. Caleb could see that in the way his shoulders relaxed, if only slightly. The sun outside had nearly disappeared, and the sky grew darker. Caleb lit a small lamp on the table, filling the room with soft, golden light. Elias watched the flame flicker, his breathing finally settling into a calmer rhythm. The beginning of trust had taken root. Caleb didn't yet know what Elias had been running from. Elias didn't yet know if he could truly trust Caleb with his secret. But one thing was clear. Their paths had crossed for a reason, and the quiet ranch, untouched by the troubles of the outside world, had become a place of refuge, if only for the night. Elias whispered a final sentence before his eyes grew heavy with sleep. "Thank you for not turning me away." Caleb gave a reassuring nod. "Rest now. We'll talk when you're ready." And as darkness settled gently over the ranch, the first part of their unexpected story quietly began. The soft glow of the small lamp in Caleb's kitchen gave the room a peaceful warmth. Outside, night covered the land like a calm blanket. But inside, the quiet air held something heavier. Elias sat wrapped in the blanket Caleb had given him, his hands resting on the table, though they still trembled from exhaustion. Caleb moved carefully around the room, giving him time to settle. He didn't want to push him into speaking too soon. After several minutes of silence, Elias lifted his eyes. They looked clearer now, not as clouded by fear as before, though still carrying a deep worry. Caleb sat down across from him with a gentle nod, silently letting Elias know he was ready to listen whenever Elias felt ready to talk. Elias took a slow breath, as if preparing himself, then let it out unevenly. "I should tell you why I ended up here," he said softly. His voice was still weak, but it didn't shake as much as before. "You can take your time," Caleb replied in his steady tone. "No rush. Just speak when you feel ready." Elias nodded, staring down at his fingers as they nervously tapped the wooden table. "I've been living in a small town, a few days' ride from here. It was a quiet place, not very different from this ranch. I worked odd jobs, helped at the supply store, sometimes did simple tasks for the local office. Nothing grand, nothing special." His lips pressed together, forming a thin, worried line. Caleb waited, offering him space. "One day," Elias continued slowly, "I ended up at the wrong place at the wrong time. I heard something I shouldn't have heard, something that wasn't meant for anyone outside the town office." He paused again. Caleb noticed he wasn't describing the event with any harsh words, as if he was trying hard to keep the story gentle, avoiding anything unpleasant. He appreciated that effort and let Elias continue at his own pace. "I had gone to the office to drop off a few papers," Elias said. "The building was quiet, and I thought no one was there. But when I walked past one of the doors, I overheard two people talking. Important people. People with more authority than I ever had." His fingers tightened around the blanket. "Before I could leave, they opened the door and saw me. And right away, they looked at me with concern. They knew I heard something private, something they didn't want shared." Caleb nodded slowly, doing his best to keep his expression calm so Elias wouldn't feel judged or nervous. "They didn't say anything harsh," Elias added quickly. "They didn't shout. They just gave me a long, serious look. I could tell they wanted me to forget what I heard and pretend everything was normal. But their expressions told me they were worried about me. Very worried." Elias looked down again. "From that moment, the atmosphere around me changed. People who used to talk to me kindly became distant. Some stopped speaking to me altogether. And the two people from the office began paying close attention to where I went, who I talked to, and what I did. It felt like I was constantly being watched." Caleb leaned forward slightly. "That must have been difficult." "It was," Elias whispered. "I didn't know who I could talk to. I didn't know who I could trust. I wasn't even sure if I had done anything wrong by hearing something by accident. I tried to keep to myself, but the more I tried to stay invisible, the more uneasy I felt." A long silence stretched between them. Elias collected his thoughts before continuing. "One evening, when I was walking home, I realized someone was following me. Not openly, just at a distance. Every time I stopped, they stopped. Every time I changed direction, they did the same. I felt a tightness in my chest, like something was closing in on me." His voice lowered. "That's when I decided to leave town. Not because anyone had harmed me, but because the pressure, the worry, the feeling of being watched, it became too much for me to handle." He took a sip of the water Caleb had left on the table, his hands a little steadier this time. "I packed a few things, took my horse, and left before sunrise," Elias said. "I thought if I traveled far enough, the feeling would go away. I thought I'd find peace somewhere else." Caleb nodded. "But it didn't. Did it?" Elias shook his head. "No. Even as I rode across the open land, the fear followed me. Not people, just fear. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow made me think someone had caught up. I traveled for days with barely any rest. I ate almost nothing. I kept pushing myself because I felt like if I stopped, I would be found." His voice faded for a moment as he looked down at his worn hands. "I didn't want trouble. I never wanted any of this. I just stumbled into something that wasn't meant for me." He hesitated before adding, "I started telling myself that maybe I should stop running, that maybe I was causing more fear by trying to escape. but I was too tired to think clearly. End quote. That's why, when I reached your ranch, I said something that didn't make sense. I wasn't asking for anything harmful. I just wanted the fear to stop. I wanted someone, anyone, to help me calm down. I was desperate. I didn't know what I was saying. Caleb placed his hands on the table, the gesture calm and reassuring. Elias, I understand. You were overwhelmed. Anyone would feel that way after days of fear and exhaustion. What you felt wasn't shameful. It was human. Elias swallowed hard, his eyes growing glossy. I thought maybe you would send me away, or ask me to explain things I couldn't explain clearly. But instead, you helped me. You didn't judge me or question me. And for the first time, in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. Caleb offered a small, comforting smile. Sometimes, people just need kindness, and there's nothing wrong with asking for help. Elias let out a shaky breath, not from weakness, but from the quiet relief of finally sharing his burden with someone who listened without judgment. I didn't mean to bring trouble to your home, he said softly. I just didn't know where else to go. Your ranch looked peaceful, and something in me hoped you might be a fair man. Joe. You're safe here, Caleb replied firmly, his tone gentle but confident. Whatever worries you, we'll figure out a way to bring peace back into your life. Elias looked down again, but this time the expression on his face was calmer. The lines of fear had softened. The trembling in his hands had eased. I haven't felt safety in a long time, he said quietly. Well, Caleb said with a small smile. You're feeling it now. And tomorrow, after you've rested, we can talk more. Maybe there's a simple answer to all this. Sometimes things look bigger and scarier when we're tired. Elias nodded slowly, letting the words settle inside him. Thank you, Caleb. Truly. Get some sleep, Caleb said. You've done more than enough talking for one night. As Elias finally relaxed, his eyes closing gently, Caleb watched him with quiet understanding. He didn't know all the details yet, but he knew enough. Elias was a good man, caught in a difficult place, and Caleb was determined to help him find calm again. The night outside remained peaceful, carrying the soft hum of wind across the land. Inside, the ranch became a small haven for a weary traveler who just needed someone to listen and believe in him. And little by little, trust began to replace fear. Morning arrived gently on Caleb Hartley's ranch. Soft sunlight touched the wooden porch, the barn, and the quiet fields. Birds chirped near the fence line, and a cool breeze carried the smell of fresh earth. It was the kind of morning that usually made Caleb feel calm and ready for the day. But today, something felt different. He couldn't shake the sense that something important was approaching. Inside the house, Elias Crane was still asleep, wrapped comfortably in the blanket Caleb had given him. His breathing was steady, his face finally peaceful after so many days of worry. Caleb didn't want to wake him. After all the stress Elias had gone through, rest was the best gift he could offer. Caleb stepped outside, closing the door softly behind him. He walked toward the barn, letting the cool air clear his thoughts. He had spent most of the night thinking about everything Elias had told him. The story wasn't full of harsh details, but it was full of a deeper kind of fear, the kind that grows quietly and slowly wears a person down. Elias hadn't done anything wrong. He had simply overheard something private, something that made certain people nervous. And instead of explaining things calmly, those people had acted in a way that scared him. No threats, no harsh words, just silence, distance, and quiet pressure. It had been enough to break Elias's peace and push him to run. Caleb understood fear like that. The West was full of moments where someone's safety depended on the choices of others. He had always believed in fairness, in staying calm, and in helping those who came to him honestly. But he also knew that worry could spread like dust on the wind. And if the people Elias had left behind started asking questions and looking for him, they might eventually reach this ranch. Not with harmful intent. Caleb hoped just confusion or concern. Yet the thought made him uneasy. He fed the animals, checked the horses, and moved through his morning tasks, all while keeping an eye on the open land. The ranch sat in a wide valley, with long stretches of grass and distant hills. Usually, Caleb loved the openness. Today, it made him feel watched, even though he saw no one. As the sun rose higher, Caleb walked back to the house. He found Elias awake, sitting at the table with a cup of warm tea Caleb had left for him earlier. Elias gave a small, grateful smile. "Thank you for letting me rest. I didn't realize how tired I was." "You needed it," Caleb said kindly. "How are you feeling now?" "A little clearer," Elias replied, still worried, but calmer than yesterday. Caleb nodded. "Worry doesn't disappear in a day. But you're safe here. At least for now." Elias's smile faded slightly. He looked down at the cup in his hands. "Do you think the people from town might come looking for me?" Caleb considered the question carefully. He didn't want to frighten Elias, but he also didn't want to lie. "It's possible," he said honestly. "If they're confused or concerned about your sudden leave, they might try to find out where you went. But that doesn't mean they intend anything harmful. Sometimes people make mistakes when they're trying to protect their own interests." Elias nodded slowly. "I just don't want to bring anyone else into trouble. Especially you." "You didn't bring trouble," Caleb said in a steady tone. "You asked for help, and that's what good people do. They help one another." Elias swallowed, his eyes softening. "You're a good man, Caleb. Not many would say that." Caleb smiled modestly. "I'm just trying to do what's right." A quiet moment passed between them. Elias looked out the window, watching the breeze move through the grass. "I wish things were simpler," he murmured. "I wish I could explain everything to the people at the office in a way that didn't cause worry." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes fear grows when there is no communication. Maybe talking to them calmly could solve everything." Elias thought about it, his brow furrowing. "And that's all right," Caleb assured him. "You're allowed to take time." They sat in peaceful silence for a while. Caleb's presence seemed to anchor Elias, giving him comfort he hadn't felt in a long time. But then, something outside caught Caleb's attention, a faint cloud of dust rising in the distance. He stood and walked toward the window to get a better look. Elias noticed his sudden focus. "What is it?" Caleb narrowed his eyes, watching the slow, steady movement of shapes far off near the horizon. "Looks like riders." Elias stiffened. "Here?" "Too early to tell where they're heading," Caleb said calmly. "This land is open. Riders pass through often." But inside, Caleb felt that tightening again, the same sense he had woken up with. Elias rose from his seat, gripping the edge of the table. His breath grew unsteady. "Caleb, what if it's them? What if they followed me all the way here?" Caleb turned and gave him a reassuring look. "Elias, take a breath. We don't know anything yet. And even if they are headed this way, it doesn't mean they're here to cause trouble. People sometimes follow simply to talk or clarify things." Elias tried to calm himself, but the worry was visible in his eyes. He walked to the window beside Caleb and squinted into the bright sunlight. "How many riders?" he asked quietly. "3, maybe 4, Caleb said. "Still far away. They could be anyone." Elias nodded slowly, though the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. Caleb placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Listen to me. No matter who they are, I won't let anything unpleasant happen here. My ranch is a peaceful place, and I intend to keep it that way. If they want to talk, we'll talk." Calmly. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, taking in the comfort of those words. "I trust you," he whispered. Caleb gave a small nod. "Good. Then let's not jump to conclusions." They watched the distant riders for several minutes. Sometimes the shapes disappeared behind small rises in the land, then reappeared again. It was impossible to tell who they were or what they wanted. Caleb stepped away from the window. "Why don't you rest in the barn loft for a bit? Not hiding, just relaxing. It's quieter there. And cooler." Elias hesitated, then nodded. "All right." Caleb guided him outside, walking with him at an easy pace. The morning sun warmed their backs as they crossed the yard. Inside the barn, the scent of old hay and wood created a peaceful atmosphere. The horses nickered softly as Elias climbed the small ladder to the loft. "You can sit by the window up there," Caleb said. "You'll get fresh air. And you can see the sky." Elias settled into the loft, his breathing calmer. "Thank you, Caleb." Caleb gave a reassuring smile and returned to the yard. He didn't position himself as if preparing for trouble. He simply walked slowly, observing the land the way he always did. But he stayed attentive, not out of fear, but out of readiness. As the riders approached the distant ridge, Caleb stood with a relaxed posture, hands resting easily at his sides. The wide-open land stretched around him, bathed in sunlight and silence. Whatever was coming toward the ranch, whether it was simple travelers, curious townsfolk, or someone from Elias's past, Caleb knew he would face it with calm, fairness, and steady understanding. Behind him, in the barn loft, Elias watched through the small window. His heart beat faster, not from danger, but from the unknown. The ranch, usually quiet and predictable, suddenly felt like the center of two worlds, meeting one of peaceful refuge and one of unanswered questions traveling slowly across the horizon. And as the riders drew closer, the air filled with the unspoken understanding that something important was about to unfold. The quiet ranch, peaceful only moments before, now felt filled with slow-moving tension as the riders approached. Caleb stood calmly in the yard, the breeze brushing past him, carrying the soft smell of hay and warm sunlight. He kept his posture relaxed, shoulders loose, expression steady. Nothing about him suggested fear or worry, only readiness and calm observation. Elias watched from the barn loft window. His heart thudded softly, not from danger, but from uncertainty. He pressed one hand against the wooden frame and tried to steady his breathing. The riders were close enough now that he could make out their shapes more clearly. 3 of them. Their horses moved at an easy pace. Not hurried, not threatening, just steady. Caleb finally stepped forward a couple of paces, not in a challenging way, but like a man politely preparing to greet guests. That small gesture alone eased some of Elias's nerves. Caleb always carried himself with the confidence of someone who believed in fairness above fear. The riders slowed as they neared the front of the ranch. Caleb kept his hands gently at his sides, making it clear he wasn't expecting trouble. After a moment, the first rider, a broad-shouldered man with a neatly trimmed beard, lifted a hand in a polite greeting. "Morning," the man called out. "Morning," Caleb replied, his voice calm as the warm sun. Elias leaned forward slightly from the loft. He couldn't hear every word yet, but he watched closely. The riders didn't look harsh or unfriendly. Their faces held curiosity more than anything else. "We're looking for someone," the bearded man said. Caleb nodded slowly. "People get lost sometimes. Who might you be searching for?" "Rend." The second rider, a younger woman with a soft expression, joined in. "We're from the town Elias left. Folks got worried when he disappeared so suddenly." Elias's breath caught. Hearing his name out loud made everything feel more real. But he didn't sense harshness in their tone, only concern. Caleb kept his expression neutral. "What's your connection with him?" The woman exchanged a glance with her companions. "He helped at the office. He was reliable. When he left without explanation, it surprised everyone." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. "I see." The first rider added, "We don't mean anyone harm. We just want to know if he's all right. He left in such a hurry that people didn't understand what happened. Some were worried he felt pressured or overwhelmed." Elias's eyes widened with surprise. He had expected anger or frustration. He hadn't expected gentle concern. Caleb remained steady. Why didn't someone try talking to him when things began feeling tense for him? The first rider sighed. Maybe we should have. We didn't realize how uneasy he felt. Sometimes people assume silence is enough to show understanding. But I guess silence can be misunderstood. Caleb's gaze softened just slightly. Sometimes people need clear words, not expectations. The riders nodded, accepting the truth in that. We're not here to pull him back against his will, the woman said firmly. We just want to clear up misunderstandings and make sure he knows no one holds anything against him. Elias's throat tightened. The tension he had carried for days, tension that had twisted inside him like a knot, began to loosen. Caleb studied the riders for a moment longer. Their posture, their tone, their expressions, none of it carried pressure or hidden intent. They seemed sincere, kind, even. I appreciate you explaining that, Caleb said. Let me ask you this. If he were nearby, would you speak with him calmly, without pushing him into anything before he's ready? The woman nodded quickly. Of course. He doesn't owe anyone anything. We only want him to feel safe again. And if he wants to return, I promise it will be with full understanding and no pressure. And if he doesn't want to return? Caleb asked. The first rider smiled gently. Then we wish him well and let him choose his own path. Caleb could sense the truth in their words. A small breeze brushed across the yard, lifting a few loose strands of hay. The air lightened, the tension easing. After a long, thoughtful moment, Caleb finally said, Elias is here. All three riders straightened, not with surprise, but with quiet relief. He's all right, Caleb continued. Just tired. Very tired. And overwhelmed. The woman placed a hand over her heart. I'm glad he's safe. Caleb lifted a hand toward the barn. He's in the loft. I'll let him decide if he wants to come down. He turned and walked toward the barn with a calm, steady pace. Inside, he climbed the ladder halfway and called softly, Elias. Elias's breath trembled. I heard everything, he whispered. No, Caleb said gently. They seemed genuinely worried, not upset, not harsh, just concerned. Elias looked down at his hands. I misunderstood them, didn't I? You were tired, frightened, and unsure. Caleb said kindly. Fear can make even gentle things feel heavy. Elias swallowed and nodded. I want to talk to them. I think I need to. Caleb offered a small smile. Then come on. I'll stand with you. Elias climbed down the ladder carefully, his steps slow but steadier than before. When he stepped out into the sunlight, the riders turned toward him. Their expressions softened immediately. No tension, no pressure, just warm relief. Elias, the woman said, her voice warm. We're so glad you're all right. Elias's eyes lowered. I'm sorry I left without saying anything. I just felt too much stress all at once. I didn't know how to explain it. The first rider shook his head gently. You don't owe us an apology. We're sorry we didn't reach out sooner. We should have checked on you instead of staying silent. Elias blinked, touched by the kindness in their words. You didn't do anything wrong, the woman assured him. You simply overheard a private discussion. It wasn't meant to worry you. And it certainly shouldn't have made you feel unsafe. Elias breathed out slowly, his shoulders finally relaxing. I guess I let the fear grow bigger than the truth. That happens to all of us at times, the rider said kindly. What matters now is how you feel. Elias looked around the calm ranch, Caleb's supportive presence, the gentle riders. I feel clearer, he said softly, still unsure about the future, but clearer. Caleb stepped slightly closer, giving Elias strength without overshadowing him. I might come back with you, Elias said carefully. But I want to take things slow. No pressure, no misunderstandings. Of course, the woman said. You set the pace. We'll follow. Caleb watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction. The moment felt peaceful, like a knot slowly untying. Elias then turned to Caleb. Thank you for everything. You didn't judge me. You didn't rush me. You helped me breathe again. Caleb offered a warm, steady smile. Any good person would have done the same. Elias knew that wasn't entirely true. Not everyone would have shown such patience, but Caleb had. The riders waited nearby, allowing the two men a moment of privacy. The sun shone softly across the ranch, as if approving the peaceful resolution unfolding. Elias took a deep breath and finally said, I think I'm ready to talk to them properly now. To clear everything up. Caleb nodded. Then go ahead. I'll be right here if you need me. And with that, Elias stepped forward, not with fear this time, but with quiet courage, ready to speak, ready to heal misunderstandings, and ready to reclaim the peace he thought he had lost. The sun moved gently across the sky as the soft morning light settled on Caleb's ranch. A calm warmth filled the air, replacing the tension that had lingered earlier. Elias stood in the center of the yard with the three riders, and for the first time in days, he felt steady on his feet. His heart no longer raced with worry. Instead, it beat with a quiet, growing confidence. Caleb remained close by, not interfering but offering silent support. His presence alone made Elias feel grounded, like a steady post in the middle of shifting winds. The woman who had spoken earlier gave Elias a gentle smile. Whenever you're ready, she said. Elias nodded, grateful for her understanding. He took a slow breath, carefully gathering his thoughts. For many days, fear had guided his steps, clouding his mind and pushing him to run without looking back. But here, in the open air of Caleb's ranch, with kind faces before him, those clouds began to fade. I didn't want to disappear, Elias began quietly. I wasn't trying to make anyone worry. I just felt so overwhelmed, like everything around me was closing in. The woman nodded, listening intently. The other two riders remained respectfully quiet. Elias continued. I overheard something that wasn't meant for me. Something about important decisions and plans. When you all looked at me afterward, I thought I had stepped into something I shouldn't have. And when no one said anything clearly, I let my imagination turn silence into fear. The bearded rider sighed gently. We should have spoken to you that day. We didn't mean for our silence to make things confusing. Elias looked up, surprised by how openly he admitted it. The rider added, People get caught up in their responsibilities. Sometimes they forget that a little reassurance can prevent a lot of misunderstanding. The younger rider joined in. You were always helpful, Elias. No one at the office ever saw you as a problem or a threat. We trusted you. We still do. Those words settled over Elias like a warm blanket. For so long, he had believed he was alone, believed people saw him as someone who complicated things. But now, hearing them speak with genuine kindness, he realized he had been wrong. I thought you were upset with me, Elias said softly. I thought I had caused trouble by overhearing something private. The woman shook her head firmly. Not at all. The conversation you overheard wasn't about anything harmful. It was just a sensitive matter, and we were trying to handle it quietly. But it had nothing to do with you. Another breath left Elias, this one lighter, almost like relief, finally escaping him. The woman continued gently. When you rode off, we were worried you might misunderstand. So we came to look for you, not to pull you back, but to make sure you were all right. Elias blinked, touched by their sincerity. I didn't expect anyone to come after me. The first rider smiled kindly. Sometimes, people care more than you realize. Elias turned slightly toward Caleb, who stood quietly with his arms loosely crossed. Caleb gave him a small, encouraging nod. That simple gesture filled Elias with enough courage to face everything honestly. "I left because I was afraid," Elias admitted. "I thought I had become a burden, and I didn't know how to talk about it." "No one is a burden for having feelings," the woman said softly. Those words made Elias close his eyes for a moment. They sounded like something he had needed to hear his whole life. When he opened his eyes again, the sunlight reflected gently off the land, like the world itself had softened. "I think," Elias said slowly, "I needed space to understand my own mind. To breathe. This ranch gave me that. Caleb gave me peace and understanding." Caleb shifted slightly, embarrassed by the praise. "You just needed rest. That's all." But Elias shook his head. "No. I needed someone to speak to me with patience. Someone who didn't judge me. You helped me find the courage to face what I was running from." Caleb's warm smile reflected the honesty of Elias's words. "You found that courage on your own." The riders watched the exchange with soft admiration. Then, the younger of the group asked gently, "Elias, what would you like to do now? If you want to return to town, we'll make the ride comfortable and calm. And if you want more time here, that's perfectly all right too." Elias took his time answering. He looked around the ranch, the barn, the house, the wide fields. This place had become a small haven in a world that had felt too heavy for him. The peaceful air had helped him clear his thoughts. Caleb's steady kindness had helped him rebuild his confidence piece by piece. "I think," Elias began softly, "I'd like to go back. Not because I feel pressured, but because I want to. I want to speak clearly, face to face. I want to correct the misunderstandings and start fresh." The riders offered warm smiles of approval. "But," Elias added gently, "I'd like to return slowly, maybe spend a few days preparing. Caleb's ranch helped me breathe, and I don't want to rush back into anything before I've fully settled inside." Caleb nodded. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need." Elias felt his throat tighten with gratitude. "Thank you, Caleb, truly." The bearded rider stepped forward. "We respect whatever you decide. We'll return to town and let everyone know you're safe and taking some time. When you're ready, we'll welcome you back with open arms." Elias smiled a genuine, bright smile that felt like sunlight after a long storm. "That means more than you know." Before leaving, the riders shook Caleb's hand and thanked him for his kindness. Caleb accepted their gratitude humbly, simply replying, "It was the right thing to do." As the riders mounted their horses, Elias called out softly, "Thank you for coming, and thank you for understanding." The woman smiled warmly. "Take all the time you need. Your peace matters." They rode off slowly, their figures gradually fading into the golden horizon. The dust behind them lifted gently into the air, before settling again, leaving the ranch quiet once more. Elias turned to Caleb. "I didn't expect such kindness from them." Caleb shrugged lightly. "Most people are kinder than we think. Fear just makes it difficult to see." Elias looked out over the land. "I feel lighter, like someone took a weight off my chest." End quote. "That's how clarity feels," Caleb said. Elias spent the next few days helping around the ranch. He fixed a few loose boards, helped feed the animals, and walked the fields with Caleb. Each day, he felt a bit stronger, a bit more sure of himself. And each night, he slept deeply, comforted by the quiet surroundings. As the week passed, Elias felt ready, not pressured, but genuinely ready to return to his town and speak openly. Before leaving, he stood with Caleb on the porch. The sun was rising behind them, lighting the ranch in soft gold. "Caleb," Elias said quietly, "I'll never forget what you did for me." Caleb shook his head gently. "You found your own peace. I just gave you a place to rest." Elias smiled. "Sometimes a place to rest is all a person needs to start again." Caleb offered his hand. Elias shook it firmly. Their handshake held gratitude, friendship, and quiet respect. With his spirit steadier and his fears eased, Elias climbed onto his horse and looked back at the ranch that had changed everything for him. "I'll come visit," he promised. "You're welcome anytime," Caleb replied. Elias turned his horse toward the road, feeling sunlight warming his back. As he rode away, he felt no fear, only peace, understanding, and hope. Caleb watched him go with a calm smile, knowing he had done something meaningful. Something simple, yet powerful. He had given someone the strength to reclaim his life. In a world full of noise and misunderstanding, Caleb's ranch had become a quiet place where a man could recover, reflect, and rise again. And sometimes, that one gentle moment was all it took to change an entire story.